What is the misunderstanding that society has around kids and how they operate?
The patterns of behavior that we've passed down from generation to generation. We have a tendency to do the same thing that of how we were raised, or the adults that were around our life, the way that they reacted to us tends to be the way that we react to our children.
Yeah. In my culture, I ain't never heard of no self-regulation, right? Like what what is that, right? Like
What self-regulation is our ability to, one, recognize that we're in that place of feeling very emotional and being able to kind of calm ourselves down to the point where we can make a more rational decision.
Hey family, welcome to another episode of The Love Lens, changing your view on love, one episode at a time. Now, I'm your host, Coach Kaz, America's go-to love doctor, but today I'm doing something a little bit different, right? If you don't know, I'm a mom. And I love following this individual on these social media streets. Mr. Chaz is a parenting expert. He's a content creator. He is an influencer. He is just absolutely amazing in what he does. And I had to beg this man to come on this show to really share with us the insights behind the brain, parenting, and dating. I'm telling you, it's all related. So we're going to get into it. Make sure to pull up a chair, hit subscribe, make sure to like all the notifications. Now let's get into this. Welcome, Mr. Chad.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks. I'm glad we could finally do this.
Woo! Hallelujah. So excited that you're here. So Mr. Chaz, like, what do you see as the main breakdown, right? So let's start with the kids, right? And then add it up to the adults. So when it comes to children, I feel like parents just don't understand, right? And I'm Jamaican. I say that I have a Jamaican uncle somewhere inside of me, because you were taught that you kind of gruff at children and they're supposed to just attend, and get in order. Yeah. So can you share a little bit of like, what is the misunderstanding that society has around kids and how they operate? Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a big question. And really where this all comes from and why we have a tendency to use more, what I would say, fear and control based practices as opposed to connected and collaborative based practices is because it's what we received. It's the generational cycles. And when I say generational cycles, I just mean the patterns of behavior that we've passed down from generation to generation. We have a tendency to unconsciously, sometimes consciously, but many times unconsciously just do the same thing that of how we were raised, or the adults that were around our life, the way that they reacted to us tends to be the way that we react to our children.
Yeah.
And often for the same kind of things too. And when you talked about the uncle in your head, like that's part of what's happening. You have this inner voice that was really conditioned and trained and created by the way adults were reacting to you when you maybe made mistakes, when things happen in your childhood. Now that becomes your inner voice. And so when a child does something like maybe touch something they're not supposed to, or say something that you wouldn't prefer for them to say, that voice comes up and maybe for you, it's the Jamaican uncle, but for everybody, it's something different, but it's the adults that we were raised by. And really, we say things like, if I would have done that, what would have happened to me? I would have, right? And you can hear that as part of that inner voice that is continuing to really push us to use more fear and control based practices as opposed to connected and collaborative based practices that will help us thrive better, that will teach us skills like how to self-regulate and respond, how to keep our composure, how to offer empathy, how to set boundaries in a respectful way. And these are really important for when we, especially because you're a relationship coach, when we get in a relationship with other people, because we often don't have the skills to navigate relationships in a healthy way because we don't really have a lot of great models for that. We weren't taught or modeled how to set and respect boundaries in a way that that, gets your point across, that communicates what's not okay, but also communicates what you want the other person to do instead. We haven't learned how to give genuine empathy, to see the emotional message behind what someone is saying and offer empathy, right? We haven't learned the skill of self-regulating. So we're not just reacting with our emotions. Instead, we're able to self-regulate and respond. And these are all very important skills, not just when raising children, but also just being in a relationship with anyone.
Yeah, so you said so much there, Mr. Chaz. So when we talk about the inner voice, so literally as parents, we are creating our child's inner voice. That's pretty scary to have that amount of power. And I don't know if the parents that are listening, right, realize that. And now I know many of you already have grown children. You're like, oh no, it's too late for my life, right? But for those of you that have younger children, I want you to start to think about, what is that inner voice saying that you're leaving with them? And maybe it's time that you change that voice. So now, in terms of self-regulation, what does that mean, Mr. Chaz? In my culture, I ain't never heard of no self-regulation, right? Like, what is that, right? Like, if somebody's doing something wrong, it's a problem and you make it go away, right? Go sit down, go to the corner, whatever. There's a punishment. Like, what exactly is self-regulation and why is it so important?
Yeah. So everyone has had that experience of your emotions getting the best of you, right? Where you get angry or you get mad or you're sad or whatever, and you do things that you probably wouldn't have done if you were, we would say, kind of, even if things were going well, if you were kind of at your best, right? We often tend to regret those things, or sometimes we say things in our relationships that you can never take back. But you said it because you were in the heat of the moment and you were really upset, and that's just what came out, right? And it's almost like, who was that person who was even saying those things or who hurt you in that way?
Yeah.
And what self-regulation is our ability to, one, recognize that we're in that place of feeling very emotional and being able to kind of calm ourselves down to the point where we can make a more rational decision, where we can use more of our skills, where we're more likely to take actions that actually align with our values, right? That align with who we want to be. And so that is the skill of self-regulation, learning how to actually calm yourself to do that, so you're not letting your emotions get the best of you. And why is this so important? Because I just gave an example for a relationship, but not just relationships, but also during work, right? Maybe someone, you felt disrespected by what someone said to you at work, or you felt like you're not heard. What we have a tendency to do, we might, one, go to aggression and go and yell and give them a piece of our mind, and to the point where now they can't really hear what we're saying. We might do something or say something that puts our job in jeopardy. And that's not really helping us to thrive in our modern, complex world, right? We want to be able to communicate, hey, I felt disrespected when this happened. Treat me this way instead, without verbally or physically attacking the other person. And if we don't self-regulate, we're going to be likely to do that. And that's likely not going to get our message across. And it's probably going to be counterproductive for what we really want to do, which is to thrive in this work environment that we're in. And so that's another example of why self-regulation is so important. It is, and it's also a greater indicator. If we're able to self-regulate and respond, that's called emotional intelligence. And that is a greater predictor and indicator of success than IQ is, right? And you can learn how to self-regulate. Now, it's going to take practice. It's going to take work, because we have these, our body and brain might be conditioned to react. We might have a lot of trauma that we've experienced that we're healing from. And all those things are going to make it more difficult to self-regulate and respond, as opposed to just react unthoughtfully with our emotions.
Yeah, but that's a big deal, right? So you're saying that emotional intelligence actually is a prediction of success more than just being smart, right? So really it's being able to self-regulate, being able to have self-control around your emotions, not react. I think about so many instances in my own family where, people get together and then they butt heads and then people are screaming and it's just like, how did we get here? Right? Or if something suddenly happens in your life, not being able to regulate. I'm thinking about a family member whose car got towed and you thought that it was the end of the world because their car got towed. And so, just thinking about, wow, being able to regulate even as an adult. So, okay, you didn't get taught it as a child, to take the time now as an adult to start to think about, okay, I have control over my emotions and everything doesn't need a reaction. Or maybe I need to take a breath or a sip of water or take a moment to think to myself, how do I want to react to this situation? Because I might lose my job. I might go to jail. I might end up in some trouble.
Lose a friend. Might lose a friend or rupture or break a relationship that's really important to you with a spouse, right? And so these are in our relationships. Now, the job thing is important.
Yeah.
I would put the importance of the relationships higher than that because that is really what creates our quality of life, right? The quality of our life is the quality of our relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, you could even have someone who is like the smartest person in the room and some people may have had this experience where you worked at a place where someone might have the most knowledge in the room, but if they're a jerk, they let their emotions get the best of them and they treat people badly. No one wants to work with them. They could cause more harm to the team than good because they don't have that emotional intelligence. They don't know how to manage their emotions or be empathetic to other people to listen to other people. And so these are some of the most important skills that we can learn for just our quality of life throughout life.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. There's just so many instances, right? So many instances where we lose our stuff. And I'm thinking about one couple that I knew that did not make it, right? And, the wife was passionate. This is what she called it. Oh, I'm passionate. But she would essentially pop off at her husband and he did not appreciate that. Right? So I'm just thinking about the breakdown of so many relationships. And it's really because folks don't have the self-regulation ability to explain or share how they really feel. To me, you have to be vulnerable enough to share how you really feel versus being accusatory. So when it comes to vulnerability and the brain or teaching children to then become adults, I know it's a lot. Like, how important is it to teach vulnerability and what that looks like?
Oh man. I mean, it's a part of learning. It's a part of helping them get to the place we call it the executive state to help them really be able to practice their best skills. Okay. So let me kind of break it down for you. Right. And I kind of have, maybe not everyone's going to see the little posters that I have and adjust my computer a little bit so you can kind of get a better picture of everything. So you have your you have your 4 brain states or your 3 brain states: survival state, emotional state, and executive state. Now, before I break this all down, it's important to recognize that this is a metaphor what's happening in the body and the brain, right? This is a way to simplify and explain what's happening in the body and the brain in a way that we can more easily understand and use this information even in the heat of the moment. So when we're in a survival state, that this is where our physical reactions come from. It's the first part of the brain that develops. And it's the main job is to try to keep you safe, right? And when we're in a survival state, we're like going to be using our survival state skills, right? Flight, fawn, and freeze. And by the way, this comes from I want to say 28-year-old social emotional learning program called Conscious Discipline. So fight, flight, fawn, and freeze are survival state skills. And so when we're in a survival state, we're going to be likely to use those skills. And the more time we spend in a survival state, the more we're going to be practicing those skills. Now, when we're in this state or your child is in this state, the question that their brain and body is asking them is, Am I safe?
Mm.
And for them to be able to move up in the brain, so to speak, to the emotional state, they have to be able to answer that question, am I safe? With an affirmative yes. And it's not enough for us to say, you're fine, get over it, it's no big deal, you're safe, you're fine. We have to exude that safety. They have to feel that safety. So sometimes, and that's where us shoving down our emotions doesn't really help, because a lot of times we don't actually self-regulate. Instead, what we do is we just shove down our emotions and pretend we're not feeling our emotion,
Yeah.
but it's in our body language and our tone still comes out of maybe our anger and our frustration, and they can feel that it's not safe. And so when they don't feel safe, they're going to be using fight, flight, fawn. And so for fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. And for those who don't know what fawn means, because it's not as a common word as the other three, it's pretty much just disregarding your own needs to please somebody else.
Mm.
That's what fawning is, right? And so when we're in a survival state, we're going to be likely to use our survival state skills. And sometimes we as an adult get in a survival state and we physically lash out because we are in a survival state. Now, if we do feel safe, then we will be able to move up to the emotional state. Now, the emotional state are some of the characteristics of the emotional state are the verbal reactions, right? The survival state was the physical reaction, and the emotional state is the verbal reaction.
Mm.
And so things like blaming, things like name calling, social exclusion, these are classic emotional states skills. We have a tendency to see the world as me versus you. This is where our kind of inner monologue, our inner voice kind of comes up. Our mental models come up of how we see the world that was conditioned in us from the time that we were young. This is where all of that stuff comes up, right? And so the trigger for us getting to an emotional state is simply the world not going our way, right? So for example, someone cuts us off in traffic, right? Very classic thing. We tend to get in an emotional state, and we might have say some words where we are verbally attacking. You see the world as me versus you. Sometimes we're like, oh man, those Tennessee drivers, like they can't drive. It's always somebody outside the state. It's always like, man, those people and I'm from Northern Virginia, people be like, man, people in DC can't drive, or people from New York can't drive, whatever, right? Because it's just a natural reaction to see the world as me versus you. And the trigger for getting an emotional state is the world not going our way. And the trigger for us getting to a survival state is a threat or perceived threat, right? And so it doesn't have to actually be a real threat. Sometimes just the 2-year-old saying, no, you perceive that as a threat.
Yeah.
Right. And so you might react physically. Right. Or sometimes you might react verbally if you're just like, oh, I know if I would have said no to my parent, I would have been smacked. So I'm going to call them bad or whatever it is. Right. But when we're down in the lower states of our brain, we're not able to use our executive state skills, which are where our more thoughtful skills are. It takes a little bit longer to get to our executive state than it does to react from our survival state. And our executive state skills include things like time management, organization, impulse control, emotional regulation, flexibility, perspective taking, metacognition, which is being able to intentionally talk to yourself, and so many other. Those are just to name a few of the executive state skills that I'm sure that we all wish our children have a little bit more of. But for us to help them practice those executive state skills instead of practicing to physically lash out or physically lash out or verbally lash out, for us to practice those executive state skills that are going to help us more thrive in life, or I call kind of thrival skills instead of the survival skills, they have to have a sense of, one, they have to feel safe, and have to felt sense of safety. And for the emotional state to move up to the executive state, they have to feel a sense of belongingness, connection. Like they have to feel understood. When they feel that sense of belongingness and understood and connection, and they feel safe, then they will be able to practice those skills of impulse control, of emotional regulation, of time management. We'll be able to do so much with them in terms of practicing how to communicate your disappointment or frustration when things don't go your way, how to practice being empathetic to your your sister or your brother or another person, how to practice setting a boundary, how to practice respecting a boundary, right? These are skills that really can only be practiced when they're in executive state. And when they're in an emotional state, they're not going to be practicing those skills that are so important for us to learn and grow and thrive as humans in this modern world. Now, my last thing on this, now maybe like back in prehistoric times, like it's very understandable that we might have to use a little bit more survival state skills, right? Because there are more threats. There's a lion who's bearing down at you, or a tiger who's bearing down at you, maybe about to eat your face off. Flight, running away, or fighting might be a better skill to use than empathy in that moment. The problem is those generational cycles have been passed down from generation to generation to generation. And it's really hard for us to just learn new skills and then break those generational cycles or those patterns of behavior.
Listen, have you ever struggled when it comes to conversations on dates? Maybe a first date or even your 50th date. One thing I know is that we need to have more meaningful conversations. And that's why I created the Love Deck. 60 questions to ask before choosing the one, but really to deepen your conversations. So whether it's with that guy that you're dating or with your mom or your close girlfriends, what I know is we got to speak more to the heart of our people. Grab your Love Deck today. It's a great gift for others, and you could get it right now in our Amazon store. Pick up yours. One side is affirmations. The other side is dating conversations. Get yours today. Pick up the Love Deck. This is amazing, right? So I'm just thinking about there's so many instances, right, where we are in this survival, like the people pleasing. Right. I am still working on being a reformed people pleaser because, you kind of just want to do for the people that are around you. But then it's just like at the end of the day, you kind of just want to be approved. You want to belong. Right. So it's to be seen and to be understood and to belong. I'm just thinking about how this totally interacts with romantic relationships. Like you want your person and you want your person to understand you. And when they don't understand you or when you feel rejected by them, it's like you're going down the slippery slope. And how do you come back is what I'm hearing is the self-regulation is really not up to the other person. It's more up to you. Would you agree with that? Or would you say that it's more external?
No, it's 100%. You can only control your own thoughts, feelings, and action. You can't control what other people think, feel, or say or do. You can only control what you think, feel, or do. The only person you can change is yourself. But when you get good at being able to change yourself, being able to control, what you do, how you think, your actions, then you're able to have a huge impact on others still. And so we talk about a conscious one all the time. The only person that you can change is yourself, because a lot of times we focus so much on trying to control others. And again, this is remnant. This is left over from our childhood of being controlled so much. And even when you talk about that fear of rejection, right? How did your adults in your life react to you when you made a mistake? Right. And they, did the timeout or they hit you or whatever it was. They were almost really kind of conditioning you to experience and for your brain to kind of see the world as, if I don't please everyone, like my needs don't matter because it's, your feelings don't matter. You just gotta do what I say and do it without saying, if you don't do what I say, then you're going to get hurt. Right. And so that conditions us to now in the real world, to completely disregard what we're feeling and just like, I'm not going to be accepted by my group if I don't disregard my own feelings for others, if I don't
Mm.
disregard my own needs for others.
Wow.
Right.
This
And
is
so,
this is powerful, Mr. Chaz, because you're saying a lot, because a lot of the women that are in my community or who have joined us, there is a fear of rejection that is heavy. It's heavy of, maybe I met someone and it didn't work out before, right? And it could be I met someone yesterday, but then they didn't call back. And it's like this heavy feeling. It's like, we don't know this person. So what you're saying is from their childhood, taking a look at what did rejection mean? Who rejected them? Their parents, and all of the extra stories that are behind there that have nothing to do with the current day, but more of what they went through as a child.
yes. And learning to be able to really experience those really sometimes uncomfortable emotions,
Mm.
right? That's another cycle of just a lot of us were discouraged from expressing or feeling our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And when we did let our emotions kind of get the best of us, we were punished, we were hurt, maybe physically or verbally.
Yeah.
And so now we have this message and we tell ourselves that it's not okay for us to feel disappointment, right? As opposed to teaching children how to feel disappointment, how to work through disappointment. And us as the adults, we have to be able to hold space for a child's disappointment, for them to learn how to hold space for their own disappointment, as opposed to shoving it down and being so afraid of disappointment that you don't go out and you don't date. You don't put yourself out there and you don't even go out on the date because you're so afraid, or you don't, you know, maybe send that text and say, hey, what's going on, or whatever it is. You're so afraid of disappointment that it's stopping you from living your life, from growing, from so many things that can improve your quality of life and also help you grow as a person.
That is so good. That is so good. And disappointment is such an uncomfortable emotion. So at the end of the school year, on the last day of school, my daughter cried, but she cried in a way that felt like wailing, like she was sad. And it was the toughest experience for me because, I consume all of this, right? And it's just like, there has to be space for all of the emotions, just like Inside Out, right? So it's just like, there needs to be space for all of the emotions. They all have value. And, the way I was raised, it's like the happy emotion is the emotion that we're excited about. And all the other emotions get stuffed in a jar, get stuffed underneath a chair, and we don't talk about those. So for me, I uncomfortably allowed her to be sad. And she was sad for like a good 2 hours. And then she got herself out of it. But it was really tough to just kind of hold space for her and talk about different things as she cried and how much she was going to miss her teacher and how she wanted to send emails during the summer. And the teacher said it was okay. Could I email the teacher? But all during this, she was crying. And it was tough. So when you're talking to me about having that space for disappointment as a child so that then as an adult, you could have space for that disappointment and embrace those emotions and be okay with, all right, it's not a happy moment. You're disappointed. And that's okay. You can move past it.
Yeah. So there's a phrase that we have, and I kind of remixed it. This is a common phrase that other people have said, but I remixed it to make it rhyme because I like things that rhyme. And it says, what you resist persists. What you accept can rest. And really just saying that when it comes to emotions, when we try to resist emotions and try to like stop feeling emotions and say it's no big deal, like emotions tend to persist even longer and be even more difficult to deal with in the long run because we're trying to resist them as opposed to just accepting it as like, yes, I'm experiencing disappointment. This is hard for me. I can handle this. I got this. And feeling that, but knowing that the truth of emotions is that they will always come and they will always go, right? You're never feeling one emotion forever, right? They come and they go. And instead of trying to just resist, it's almost like we're doing a lot of work for no reason. And it's really counterproductive to our own health and our own growth. And the feelings or emotions are just messages from the body. And if we can learn to really just listen to each of the different messages that our body is sharing with us, then we can learn to not only deal with it, but also grow with it. There's this little chart, this little simple graph. I just want you to imagine since we're here. So on this side, actually, we're going to do this side because we'll just say, because this is where the survival state side is. There's problems. Problems exist here. And then the bridge to solutions are the feelings. The bridge to the solutions are the feelings. And so you experience the problem. And for this situation, thanks for giving an example because I can talk about now the example and be very concrete with it. The problem was I was having a, hard time of, I'm missing the community that I built throughout the school year. Right. And I'm having a hard time dealing with that. And I'm experiencing a lot of disappointment and it's very uncomfortable for me. Right. So that's the problem. Right. And so we can try to shove all the feelings down, which that's not going to be helpful, but experiencing that, it's like, okay, disappointment. I'm feeling that. I'm with you in this emotion. I'm not trying to change your emotion. I'm not trying to make you happy. I'm not trying to say, well, it's no big deal. You'll see them another time. Why are you crying? This happens every year. No, that's going to be unhelpful. And it's likely also going to might push them down keep them down in the lower center of the brain for even longer. But you acknowledge the feeling. You were there with her in her feelings. And then at some point that gets to eventually when you're ready. I don't think we need to rush the solution, but very naturally when we experience the feelings and we can just sit in it, like the solutions often come along, right? So you talked about like we can email the teacher, we can maybe do FaceTime and all that stuff. And it's when you're ready, I wouldn't push the solution before feeling the feeling. First, I wouldn't be like, oh, you're disappointed. We can just email your teacher.
Right.
No, you need some time to really experience that disappointment, be there in her disappointment. And when we're ready, then problem solving, then we can talk about problem solving. And the other thing that does is when a person feels seen and understood, two big things happen. One, a person is going to be more likely to take your guidance in your problem solving when they feel seen and understood, right? And so you're not have to dragging them along this journey and they're resisting because they haven't feel seen yet. And the other thing that seeing a person does is it makes it so that when you do the problem solving, you do the solutions, that your solutions are more targeted to what they're actually experiencing, their actual challenge. Your solution is actually connects to them better because you spent that time listening to what it actually is, what they're struggling with from their perspective. It's almost like trying to, imagine the olden days, right? Before the days of GPS, and your friend is trying to get to your house and you're like, hey, they call you, they get lost and they call you and they say, hey, I'm lost. Can you direct me to your house? What are you going to ask them? What's the question you're going to ask them?
Well, where are you?
They're lost. Yeah. Where are you at? Right? Where are you at? So that because you can't guide someone effectively, now you might be able to give some general directions, maybe some general landmarks, but when you know exactly where they're at, then your guidance will be more directed towards them and it'll be more helpful for them rather than you just kind of guessing where they might be.
Yeah.
So that is the power of seeing them, allowing them to feel their feelings. And it really also is the bridge to learning how to problem solve and learn how to handle these emotions and what to do so that we can feel our feelings and also still thrive.
So now as an adult, right, I feel like you actually have to care, right? I feel like we are so caught up with ourselves and how we feel and how that impacted us that, there has to be an extra step of I super care about this person to like meet them where they are. Cause then otherwise it's just like, you know what you did? Like we get up in this way of how me, that I feel like there's a something missing where we need to be able to reach out that olive branch to say, well, where are you and how can I meet you there?
Yeah. And that's a really good point. And that actually speaks to another valuable thing of this whole difference between the fear and control and the connection and collaborative based practices. Right. And a lot of parents are on this journey because they care. A lot of teachers are on this journey because they care. I mean, a lot of even just with your relationship, a lot of people come to maybe see you or get relationship because they care. They want to stay in relationship and they want to figure out how they will do the work of their own growth because they have this connection to the other person. And so you don't need, fear. We think that you have to scare a person into wanting to learn to do better or to grow better or to repair the relationship, whatever it is. But really we are wired for connection, and really just the want to continue being in relationship with each other, to continue the connection with each other, to continue the safety with each other is enough inspiration to want to learn a new skill. And so, and not for everyone. You may not want to necessarily be empathetic to everyone. And I say like all these skills, like it's completely up to you, like who you use these skills with. Like you don't necessarily have to, because it is work to do if you want to. Like if you just want to like, okay, I'm just going to cut you off and like, I'm not even going to try to repair the relationship. I'm the full belief that is completely up to you. And that's a choice that you have the free will to make.
Right.
But if you want to stay in relationship with somebody, if you want to help someone learn and grow, these are essential skills to learn how to self-regulate, to learn, genuine empathy without trying to change their emotions, to learn how to encourage, to learn how to see the best in other people, to bring out the best in people. These are essential skills that you will need to learn to build, maintain, and sustain healthy relationships.
Are you someone that goes to all the conferences? You get your CEUs for your job. You're always up leveling in personal development. I'm going to tell you one thing. You need your CEUs in love. Join me for Wanted Woman Live, the ultimate non-conference, unconference experience, 3 days in sunny South Florida this fall. This is an experience where women come together from all over the country to be able to be poured into all around love. How do you show up in love? How do you receive love? How do you just have fun with love? Join the sisterhood, an amazing experience created and curated just for you, the professional woman that desires more. Click the link below, wantedwomanlive.com. Would you say that, like breathing is the ultimate game changer with all of this? Like taking a moment to breathe instead of react. Like, I feel like people don't breathe. So what would you say about breathing?
It's a piece. Breathing is a piece of the puzzle, and breathing is talked about so much because there's so many research benefits to breathing. And meanwhile, we don't even really know how to breathe to actually get most of those benefits, right? We need to do belly breathing, right? Where your diaphragm expands, where you breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, and your belly expands. So we'll breathe for a moment right now, just since you brought it up. We'll do it together. So all three will do it. 1, 2, 3. Yes. And that out breath, you want it to be longer than your in breath. And so breathing has a lot of benefits that we know for stress management, for just overall health. It has sleep benefits. It has so many benefits.
Right.
Breathing with your belly expanding when your breath is going through your nose. But that's not the only piece to it. In conscious discipline, we actually have 5 steps to help you get to the point of I'm triggered and I'm frustrated and I want to act out my emotions, to I am now responding as opposed to reacting in a thoughtful way that I think is going to be helpful in this relationship in growth rather than potentially harmful.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to hear the 5 steps?
Of course I do.
So the first step is, for short, it's I am. And just recognizing I am triggered, right? That first step is just becoming aware I'm triggered right now. Like I'm in an emotional state. Something didn't go my way. I'm perceiving threat or there is a threat here. And so I'm triggered right now. First step, to become aware, right? Second step is I calm, which is doing something to calm your body. And we teach belly breathing because it works for everybody. If you have a body, it works. If it's not working for you, practice breathing because breathing is a very legitimate skill to practice. And also too, before I go any further, I talk about stretching your reaction into a response. And so that's kind of like what's happening here. This response takes longer than a reaction. A reaction happens in less than a second. And again, that's for you to survive, right? It's a survival thing, but it doesn't help you necessarily thrive. The response takes a little bit longer, but the more you practice the 5 steps, the quicker it will go. You'll automatically recognize that you're triggered and breathe almost automatically once you practice a lot. Now, the third step is I feel, recognizing what you're feeling, right? I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling disappointed, and recognizing the sensations in your body. Do you feel it, the tingling on your fingertips? Do you feel your cheeks getting hot? Are your fists balling up? Do you feel tight in your chest? Do you feel it in your gut coming up? We might have different sensations on our bodies, but recognizing what that feeling is. And this part of the 5 steps is to kind of separate the feeling from so you're not just acting out your feeling, so it just kind of recognizing that it's the difference between I am angry and acting out my anger and I am feeling anger. I'm experiencing anger and I can kind of see that. Right. There's a little bit of separation between the anger and me. And so I'm not just acting it out and just becoming anger.
Yeah.
And so it's the I feel. And I would say for me, in my experience, those first 3 steps are the easier steps to do. And they're all preparing you to do the 4th and the 5th step. Now, the 4th step, once you recognize you're triggered, once you calmed, once you have felt what you're feeling, you can identify and put a name to what you're feeling. Which I got one more piece on this is, we talk about name it to tame it. And the idea is you have to name the emotion so that you can tame the emotion. Something that blocks us from doing this is that we don't even, we shove the emotion down, right? Because it's those cycles that are coming up because we were told that we were being too dramatic, that we're making a big deal. It's no big deal. And so we've learned to shove down our emotions.
Yeah.
Before you name it or tame it, you have to learn how to claim it. You claim that I'm feeling disappointed, right? Now, the 4th step is choosing to see it differently, right? You have to choose to see the situation. Maybe this child isn't trying to give me a hard time. They're having a hard time, right? This child isn't a bad kid who's going to turn into a little monster, who's going to terrorize the world, who's going to be a bully, murderer, serial killer, woman beater.
Those thoughts are for everybody? Everybody has those thoughts?
Yeah. Because we were raised with these kind of the shaming and the
Jamaican uncle
narratives, these mental models, right? And so this keeps us down in the lower centers of our brain. And at this point, once we're choosing to see it differently, the reason why it's so hard is we have to kind of make the jump from this emotional state to this executive state. And this is when we're making that jump of I'm choosing to see it differently, right? This is instead of seeing them as this, labeling as this bad kid, they're just a child who needs to learn some new skills.
Yeah.
Is having a hard time right now. And when we start to see it that way, that they're just a child who is still learning to navigate life and everything's new to them and they just need someone to help them learn the skills, that
Mm.
also opens it up to like, okay, well, what skills do they need to learn? And sometimes, again, like with your daughter, it might be just learning the skill of handling disappointment, of
Mm.
learning how to just sit with the disappointment. It
Mhm.
might be a skill of learning how to set a boundary instead of hitting someone to try to set a boundary, using aggression or passivity to
Mhm.
try to set a boundary or avoid setting a boundary. It's instead using assertive communication. That might be the skill that you teach, right? It might be the skill of, going through the 5 steps of self-regulation. It might be the skill of learning how to, take turns or use a visual timer to get off of screen time, and learning how to use that so that they can process time better. Right? There's so many things that we can be teaching children, but what blocks us from the teaching of children is we get down into this like shaming and verbally attacking or maybe even physically attacking them. So we don't even get to the teaching of skills, because once we do that, they shut down, they get defensive, and they're not as open to even the practicing of the skills. We
Mm.
have one last thing I want to say on this is that we say connection primes the brain for willingness,
Mm.
right? And so when we want the child to be willing to practice a skill, to learn, do something different than the way they handle the situation this time, it's really important to kind of speak to that vulnerability piece, that we create a felt sense of safety and belongingness and connection and understanding.
Wow.
And then they will be able to practice better. And so that connection primes the brain for willingness. One last moment on connection too, because connection can a lot of times mean different things to different people. There are 4 components to connection. Eye contact. Say eye contact.
Eye contact.
Say touch.
Touch.
Say playful situation.
Playful situation.
And presence.
Presence. Mm.
Yes. These are the 4 components to the connection.
Mm.
Now you can incorporate these components in a million different ways. But those are just the components. But for those that are like struggling when a child is in an emotional state, just recognizing connection and understanding and belongingness is really helpful. And when the way that you can tell that a child's in an emotional state as opposed to a survival state is they're likely going to be using words in an emotional state. They might even be lashing out and they say, I hate you. You're not my real mom. No, you're not invited to my birthday party. These are all emotional state reactions that we would hear from children.
Yeah.
And where we would know that what they need is connection, a sense of belongingness, maybe encouragement, maybe empathy. I could go so much deeper into this, but I'm going to go ahead and stop there.
So this is, for me, it's a direct parallel to adults and being able to spend the time to do the same thing. Like just in terms of what you talked about with connection, I feel that everyone is stuck in their cell phones nowadays. And there's all the studies of how bad screen time is for kids, but I don't really know about the studies for screen time for adults, but I'm pretty sure our connectedness as adults just stink, right? Just when you get in your bed, you're using your cell phone, you're on the computer, you might give a kiss and then that's it. It's just like to spend the time to be fully present and eye contact, woo, to be playful. We're not playful. Like, I feel it.
Yeah.
There's some kind of stat about the amount of times you laugh and smile as a kid, and then as an adult, it's like we dry up like a dry raisin, right? So, so it's like to continue that playfulness into adulthood. Do you have anything to say around that? Because it's just like, I feel like it's missing. Connection is missing.
Well, it's helpful to become aware of the information and to know it, right? And then it's always going to be a choice. It's going to be hard. It's going to be harder to be playful when you are in a survival state, right? When you are worried about there's a perceived threat there, it's going to be much more difficult for you to be playful. And that's why that self-regulation is important. And being able
Mhm.
to go through those 5 steps that I mentioned are important for that. And I mean, even just in terms of our relationship, it's now that you know and have the information,
Yeah.
now you have an opportunity to practice. And I mean, you're going to be able to practice at least if, you know, it's you and a partner, it's important to recognize kind of where they're at in their state and what they need too. Right. And sometimes we're in arguments and maybe one of us is an executive state, another one is an emotional state. And maybe because they're in an emotional state, they haven't learned those self-regulation techniques. Maybe they say something that's triggering for you. And it's very easy for us to catch that emotion and go right back down to the emotional state with them. And then it's just, it's in a me versus you and
Mm.
nothing is getting solved. Nothing is, we're not solving the problem, whatever the initial problem was. The initial problem might have been, uh, the dishes weren't done and I was hoping for them to be done, but they weren't done when I came home from work. And, you know, you had the day off and I was hoping or expecting that you were going to do the dishes and they weren't done. And so things didn't go my way. So I got triggered to an emotional state. And then I'm seeing the world as me versus you. And so now I bring up something else like, why don't you ever do this? And then maybe that triggers some of your like perfectionism or some wound that you have. And so then you get down in an emotional state as opposed to recognizing, okay, they're not trying to give me a hard time. They're having a hard time and they're lashing out emotionally. And what's the emotional message behind that? And respond with empathy and try to hear them and hear what they're saying from their perspective without taking it personal. You have another phrase in conscious discipline called Q-tip. That's
Mm.
very helpful for kind of not staying in this emotional state. And it's Q-tip stands for quit taking it personally. Right.
Ooh.
And so when they say like, you never do such and such, and you know, maybe it's not a you, and you're like, well, I did it last week. What do you
Mm.
mean I never do it?
Right.
And so now we're kind of getting into that instead of hearing them and hearing their emotional message, we're now getting to defensive and saying, well, what do you mean? No, I didn't. And what about what you did? You
Mm.
didn't make the bed last week. And now it's just me versus you. And we end up talking about something that's not even what the conversation even started about. If we can, in that moment, make the choice of saying, okay, I see that, you know, my partner's in this emotional state. Let me just hear what they're trying to say. Like, it seems like, okay, it seems like you're feeling really frustrated because you were hoping that the dishes would be done and I didn't do the dishes. And so now you're feeling really upset about that.
Yeah.
I get that. And just hear them and allow them to just feel seen and heard and understood and say, okay, next time I will on my day off, I can do the dishes and we can, you know, and maybe, and especially the more you see them, the more they
Mhm.
feel seen and understood, the more but something amazing is going to happen. The more they're going to move up to their executive state. And the more we have a tendency to be like, well, actually we could also do a schedule of when I do the dishes and you do the dishes. And so that we're all on the same page. Right. And so we all know what to expect and there aren't any surprises and maybe there's even another time when they're more regulated and able to hear and maybe you can communicate, hey, this is how I would like to be communicated to. Remember when had that argument and you went in my face, you put your finger in my face.
Mm.
Remember when that happened? That I started to feel defensive and I had to self-regulate so I wouldn't get triggered. It would really be helpful for me if when you said something that you could take a breath
Mm.
and tell me what's upsetting you and what you would like for me to do without putting your finger in my face and without making your tone like without yelling at me, without getting up here. That would be really helpful for me. Now, saying that in the heat of when they were in an emotional state is not going to be very helpful,
Yeah.
right? But if you're able to be empathetic and hear their emotions, hear and see them first, connection primes the brain for willingness, remember? So
Mm.
they're going to be more willing to hear you. And they're like, you know what? I see what you're talking about. I could take a moment in the car and just take a breath or just prepare myself or maybe just go to the room real quick before I say anything to give myself a chance to collect my own emotions so I can communicate what I need from you in a way that would be, you'll be better able to hear. Right.
Yeah.
But
Oh
that takes
man.
practice and that's hard
That's
to do.
some serious practice. I'm thinking about not an argument that I had with Andy the other day, but we were driving and we were going to have family over. And I said, okay, well, can you set this boundary with a family member? And immediately he brought up something about my family. And I said, wait. If you got an issue, no problem. But this moment, I brought up something, right? So let's deal with my thing. And then later, if this is really a thing and not just out of reaction, we could talk about it. But for me, that took a lot of evolution for me to say that, right? Like, hey, I need the validation. I need you to validate the words that you heard what I asked, and I verbalized what I needed before being in the moment, right? And I'm here for you, but not right now. You gonna have to wait your turn. This ain't your turn. This is my turn, right? And he was not happy, right? He was not happy at all, but he did it, right? And he heard me, and I felt heard, and then I thanked him. And I think that's a big part of this too, is like also recognizing the growth, or when you do feel heard, taking the time out to recognize that the person is trying. Yeah.
Yeah. And two, I think there is there's a reason why he got defensive. Because what that was is that was him going down to his emotional state. You guys are driving, everyone's part of an executive state, everything's going well, and like, we're going to see family, whatever, playing music, jammed, or listen to music, whatever it is. And then when you brought up the hey, this would be helpful. We talked about like, there's something I need to do about boundaries. There's something that came up for him. Now, I don't know what it is. It could have something to do with like previous conversations, plus, his own childhood and things like that. But something came up for him where he was like, oh, I need to defend myself as opposed to hear what you're saying and really just help you feel seen and heard in that moment. Because obviously this was something that you thought about, and you took the time to really say, hey, this is something that I need, which can be already difficult for a lot of us to say like, hey, this is something that I need from you. And this would be really helpful for me, because this is not something that we practice very much as a child, right?
Exactly.
Even acknowledged, and we're used to being dismissed. And so that I wonder what would that defensiveness, why that defensiveness came up. And it happens for all of us too.
Yeah.
This is a very normal human part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And I always say like the goal isn't to like not get frustrated or not get, or overwhelmed or angry or whatever. The goal is just to recognize when you are that I am part, that when you are triggered, and learning how to kind of regulate that so that you can respond, right? As opposed to react. Well, hold up. You and then point the finger back at you, right? Blame is a huge part of that emotional state. And you see it in adults, you see it in children. And it's just one of those things. It's amazing once you learn, that's why I love conscious discipline. I love like the brain states, because once you learn it and become really familiar with, you can kind of see there's a whole different lens of when someone gets defensive and they start coming at you. Your reaction is to like, oh yeah, I got to defend myself. I got to come back at you. But then when you see in the lens, like, oh, something's not going their way. Something's coming up for them. Even just that perspective of being able to see it that way helps you Q-tip, not take it personally, and respond in the way that's going to most likely help everyone, feel understood and heard, but also get to the problem solving portion where we are learning each other's needs. We are practicing them. We are hearing each other out, and we're also coming up with solutions with challenges that we're experiencing, as opposed to adding on to challenges in the heat of the moment with our reactions, because we're letting our emotions get the best of ourselves.
This is so powerful. I think one of the most powerful takeaways for me is the Q-tip with the quit taking it personal. I feel that as adults, we take everything personal. And many times it's an attack on our character, an attack on who we are and how we see ourselves. And how could you do that to me? It's so many layers of personal stuff that we take, right? So if the person doesn't call us back for a date, it's like, it's a direct rejection of who I am as a person in this world. It's like, it's not that serious, right? Like they might not be interested, but that has nothing to do with your worth, with your value, with who you are in this world. So if we started to just not take things personal and understand that God has what he has for us, and that if it's a child, like they're going through their own stuff. And if it's an adult, they're going through their own stuff. And if we understand that everybody's going through their own stuff, we might be able to sit back just a little bit easier with a little more peace in understanding these brain states that you've presented to us. I don't know if you want people to start saying, hey, you might be in your emotional state right now. Do you need a...
I don't know if I would say that. I think it's just good information to have. I think, and what conscious discipline does is that it doesn't just help you. We talked about the different states, but it gives you specific skills and strategies to use for the different brain states that you can use. And again, it's not about necessarily changing and making the other person do something. It's about you changing yourself and how you're responding, and just the way, if you're able to control and how you respond and respond intentionally, it's going to impact the other person. And in conscious discipline, I'll kind of briefly, I wish I almost had a little, like, I don't have a visual for you right now, but I'm going to just verbally say it, that they have kind of color coded what the skills are and what to use for the different, for the different states. And even in these posters, you get these posters too. If you go to my social media stuff, they're always linked to my bio, and Mr. Chaz 24, you can get free shipping.
Oh, nice.
And even these posters, it has like exactly what skills are helpful for different states. And what's important to know before I kind of go through the different skills for the different states, what's important to know is that the skills for the lower states are going to be helpful for that state, and all the states above it can be helpful. Now, if the skills for the emotional state might not be helpful when someone is in a survival state, but they will likely be helpful when someone's in emotional state or executive state. Okay. The skills for the executive state might be helpful in an executive state, but probably won't be helpful when someone's in emotional or a survival state. So some of the things, and there's like different kind of branches. I'm going to give you just kind of the big ones. Okay. The big skills. Mm-hmm. For survival state, composure and assertiveness. Mm. Assertiveness is really just clear communication. It's also like setting boundaries is also in there. And composure is really that skill of self-regulation. And so that's going to be helpful no matter what state you're in. Clear communication and self-regulation, composure is that can be helpful no matter what state you're in. Now, for the emotional state, empathy, encouragement, and choices are the skills that are helpful here, right? And we also talked about connection, and there's like some more skills in here, but I'm going to kind of just give you the big ones. And so empathy, encouragement, and choices are really helpful when someone's in an emotional state. And again, this is when people are using more verbal reactions. They're more likely to talk. In a survival state, they're less likely that they're talking and using words, and more likely they're just physically acting out. So that's helpful, emotional state and executive state. And then for the skills for the executive state are positive intent and consequences. And when I say consequences, there are 3 different kinds of consequences. There are natural consequences, there are logical consequences, and there are illogical consequences. And that's a whole nother thing. And in each one of these skills, there's a lot to learn, because another big issue with using fear and control based practices is not just what the adults in our life are imprinting on our mental models and conditioning us with, but it's also what they're not doing, right? They're not modeling composure. They're not modeling oftentimes clear communication on and focusing on what to do as opposed to what not to do, right? They're often not focusing on empathy and using empathy. They're often not using positive intent and seeing the best in you. And they're more likely to label you and see you as, negative as opposed to the skill and the challenge of seeing the best in you to bring out the best in you, which is something that we also have to do with our partners, that they're not trying to like get on our nerves. They're just really feeling frustrated and overwhelmed at this moment or whatever it is. They said it's my way or the highway, which isn't really choices. That's, they're not showing you how to get really two positive choices, which are two choices that you would be okay with them doing. As opposed to, you better listen to me or you're going to get a spanking or you're going to go to timeout or whatever. That's really manipulation. Is the other problem with the fear and control based practices is that they're not teaching you the skills. It's not just what they're doing to you. It's also what they're not teaching you.
Mr. Chaz, now I know that you have a plethora to teach us, but we have run out of time. So now the question is, how can people find you on these interwebs? How can they connect with you? Please do share all your handles. Mm-hmm.
I'm on all social media platforms as Mr. Chaz, MRCHAZZ, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. I have a podcast called Learning Curve with Mr. Chaz. And I also do coaching. I do classes where I break all this stuff down and I teach you like skill by skill, all the things that we weren't taught growing up. And it's already been helping so many people. And so that's where I would encourage you to find me and reach out. And I'm here for you. And the one before we go, this is the most important thing I'm going to say in this whole conversation. I'm going to say it right now. Avoid being a perfectionist. Be an improvementist. The goal isn't to be perfect every day. The goal is to improve a little every day.
Amen. Oh, that's good. Oh, thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Chaz. Y'all, you know this was good, so don't keep it to yourself. Hit the share button. Make sure to subscribe to our channel because we drop new content each and every week. Oh my goodness, this was such a blessing to me. And I know for a fact every person who listened in. So whether you're a parent or not, understanding the brain and how we function and how we react and not taking things personal, I really think can change your life. So allow this episode to change your life. Continue to follow us. And in the meantime, in between time, keep loving, keep laughing, keep living. Till next time. Bye.
Bye.
So we are trying out the love deck. So let's just do random. I like this one. I like that. I knew that one.
Wanted Woman Love Deck. Y'all, this about to be good. So we played with these ones already and they were good. They was like right on the money. They was good. On one side, it has affirmations. On the other side, it has like a question. So we got to answer the question. So he going to read the affirmation part. And then on the other side, it's going to have a question.
The affirmation part is, I embrace. Oh, wow.
That's a good one.
I have these wanted woman cards from Coach Cass, our good dear friend. And she made these wanted woman cards. And I am a wanted woman by you.
Let's get that right.
Right, yeah. Right. So we're gonna read, it's like a little question and answer.
Okay.
All right, so this is one of her cards. It says, what is your favorite family tradition?
Our family tradition, our favorite family tradition is to go to church on Sunday.
That's true.
What is your favorite dance move?
My favorite, like right now, my favorite dance move?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's see. Show me what you're working with.
All right, let me show you. All right. Ow. Ow. Yeah.
That is the favorite.
Ah, that's the favorite. You've been seeing this forever, right? Ow. So yeah, you probably have. Yeah, that was the move that caught your attention. What you talking about?
What is the misunderstanding that society has around kids and how they operate?
The patterns of behavior that we've passed down from generation to generation. We have a tendency to do the same thing that of how we were raised, or the adults that were around our life, the way that they reacted to us tends to be the way that we react to our children.
Yeah. In my culture, I ain't never heard of no self-regulation, right? Like what what is that, right? Like
What self-regulation is our ability to, one, recognize that we're in that place of feeling very emotional and being able to kind of calm ourselves down to the point where we can make a more rational decision.